Hi everyone, I welcome you to another session wherein we are going to talk about something completely different. First of all, something about me. My name is Anuj Jindal, and with me today I have Mr. Amit Samdariya. He has cleared CSE in the year 2015 and 2016, and presently he is working as Deputy Commissioner in GST in Delhi. तो हम लोग आज क्या डिस्कशन करने वाले हैं वी हैव हैड अ वेरी लॉन्ग ब्रेनस्टॉर्मिंग सेशन एज टू व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इज इट दैट इज लैकिंग इन यूपीएससी प्रेप. And we came to the conclusion that whatever we have been reading till now, the way we have been taught to study, is something that is not probably acceptable or something that does not align with how UPSC demands you to study. Therefore, scientific study or a new methodology to study for this examination is something that we need to explore and probably share with students. And who else to share the same than a selected student who's cleared the examination, been through that journey, successfully cracked it, and now is in a position to guide other students as well. तो हमारा जो आज का डिस्कशन है, today's discussion is going to be about a scientific study to prepare for civil services examination. We are going to be taking over a lot of interesting points about how do you change the way you study. Amit will be telling us about his learnings and how he actually cracked the examination through his new methodologies of studying, and I will try and add whatever points I might have. So welcome, Amit. Thanks a lot for coming here.
Thank you, Anuj. It's really pleasure on this platform, and it's always wonderful to guide young students actually through this very arduous journey that is UPSC civil services preparation. So I hope we and all of you get something worthwhile from this session.
What do you think? How important is this entire topic of changing the way you study and changing the way you prepare for the examination? Were you required to change the way you prepared for this examination when you were a student?
Certainly, the way we study for especially civil services examination is very important, because the standard of preparation which UPSC demands in this exam is very high, and the syllabus is such huge that you cannot be thorough and you cannot be perfect in almost every aspect of the syllabus. So it is very important to scientifically select your strategy, implement it, and to go through every aspect of the preparation so that you get the best results within a very optimal time.
Let me start with a personal question. What were the specific things, if you can highlight some, that you kept in mind or you did that you feel changed your course of study and resulted in your success in the exam?
So actually, I graduated in mechanical engineering from IIT Delhi, and then somehow I landed in civil services preparation, and this domain excited me. So I had to choose my optional subject, and through some experiences of my seniors and colleagues, I selected public administration. Somehow I did not fare well in that optional, and I could not get selected in the initial attempts. Then the process of thinking started, that what is resulting into my repeated failure in that optional, especially in that optional subject, and also to some extent in the general studies and other aspects. So the chain of thinking and evaluation started, and I came to a conclusion that 2 or 3 aspects are very important in this process. First of all, the selection of your optional subject is of vital importance. That is something which should never be taken lightly, and there are various factors which we may discuss in subsequent discussion. Secondly, what is most important is that you have a thorough revision of everything that you study, because whatever you read will be forgotten if you don't revise it thoroughly and repeatedly, and it's of no use. And so that is also very important. And to select your strategy in this preparation scientifically, that is very important. So, and the third point which I found missing in my previous preparations and attempts was that it is very important to know what to read, but more importantly, it is also important to know what not to read, because many times students are overwhelmed with a lot of study material from different coaching institutes, from different standard textbooks also, and in their zeal to cover almost every aspect of the syllabus and to not let anything for chances, they read a lot but fail to revise and read which is not actually important also. So these three aspects I found most of the students need to work, and I try to work upon these aspects, and that led me through two selections repeatedly. And so that's what I would like to discuss also.
You were talking about revision. What is the right way to revise? Or I would like to reframe the question and probably ask you something else connected with revision. Now, we're talking about revision. So the question arises, how do you make sure that whatever you've studied, you're able to revise it properly? Because the problem is, if you're studying, let's say, economy, then there are 5 important books that you might have to go through. Now, you cannot keep going through all those 5 books again and again. So what do you do, and how do you do it to make sure that you're able to revise it properly?
So actually what I found is revision is inversely proportional to the amount of different materials that you read. So there is a tendency amongst many of students that I should be reading this particular material, but the moment I see my friend or a successful candidate recommending another material, I switch my material to something else. In that attempt or in that process, what the student feels is that what he has read, he fails to revise it, and he jumps to another material and subsequently to another material thereafter. In management, we call it queuing theory, and jockeying is the concept for it. When you land in a queue for a ticket, you find that the other line is always shorter. You shift to that line with the hope that it will lead to success or a shorter delay. हिंदी में इसको कहते हैं दूसरे की थाली में घी ज़्यादा लगना. तो the first thing which I found is that one should stick to the material which he has selected. Of course, select your material very carefully, but I found that most of the standard reading material covers at least 80 to 90% of whatever you are required. So if you go through one standard material, whatever you choose, whatever coaching or standard textbooks or whatever you choose, that is enough to cover 80 to 90% of your syllabus. That you should cover thoroughly, revise repeatedly. I find that every material should be revised at least 5 times, and if you do that, the rest 10% or 20% which is not covered in that material can be attempted even without any further reading, because that 10 to 20% can be attempted through either maybe covered in some other manner subsequently beyond that material, or you would be able to have a very intelligent guess about those aspects of the syllabus, and even failing that, the process of elimination can help you reach the correct answer. So this revision aspect is actually coupled with careful selection of your standard reading material.
That's very true, because we often make this mistake of picking up the wrong books, or probably even if it is not a wrong book, a book which is not helpful for us or which we might not be able to understand.
Yeah, actually, I believe there may not be any wrong book, because everything you read is probably adding something to your knowledge, but sometimes it's for this UPSC civil services exam, this limited time and absolutely infinite materials. So you have to be very careful in selecting it, so that the material which is covered in that book is relevant, directly relevant to your objective.
Right. So अब हमने कुछ पढ़ लिया, we've studied something, and now we want to make sure that we are able to revise it properly. Something that I tell all my students is to start making notes online, because technology is there. Why are you still stuck up with making notes on paper? And there are so many beautiful apps right now. There's Notion, there is Evernote, there is OneNote and OneDrive, and you can use all these technologies to make your study smarter. Did you follow anything like this? If not, would you recommend in this age 6 years, 7 years down the
Yeah.
line, would you recommend that students should be able to make that change from making notes on paper to making notes online?
So actually, it's quite close to my heart, making notes. Through my journey in civil services, I have gone through all the phases. I have made notes physically. I have made notes online through Evernote and other apps, and I've also had phases where I made no notes at all. So I have tried all of them, and I found it worked for me. Is in the end, uh, I generally also suggest students that please do not make notes. Please do not be very uh, enthusiastic about making notes in the first go. When you are having a first reading of anything, you find every line, every sentence very important, and you end up either coloring your book thoroughly or making notes which may run almost as much as the book itself. So please avoid that. Have a very free reading of the book in the first time, or maybe in the second reading as well. At the end of first or second reading, you now can understand what is actually important, which you would have to make a note of. So after second reading or so, or after first reading maybe, you'll actually come to write notes which you can make through physical writing on a paper or Evernote, whatever works. But don't be very zealous to make notes when you start the preparation.
Wonderful. Because I deal with economy, and economy is very dynamic. It keeps changing every day. There is something new happening. No matter what you read, you're reading, let's say, Ramesh Singh, you're reading Sri Ram sir's book, you're reading, Nitin Singhania sir came out with a book recently. Whatever you're reading, you would feel that after 6 months, you need to add something new in, let's say, monetary policy. So I always tell my students, please follow, please make notes online, number one. And then there's a method that I read about, which is followed very widely in some advanced countries in schools and colleges, that is called as Cornell Method. So probably students can search about it online and they can understand. So what happens in that method is, on the left hand side, you give everything a subtitle. So basically you are training your brain to title everything, so that you need to have shorter information in your brain rather than detailed answers.
Yeah, that's very helpful also, because in the end, your reading material may run into tens of thousands of pages, but at the time of exam, you will only get maybe a day or half for revision. No one can possibly revise all those pages, even with all the underlining or whatever. So you need to concise your notes or revision scope within a few pages. So maybe the method that you suggested could be very useful. Students may, if you find it useful, you should definitely try that also.
Another question that I have in my mind is, how do you, so for example, once you were studying in school, students were in school or in college, we have a habit of studying through books. For example, if you've picked up one book, let's say Dr. Amartya Sen's, let's say some book, An Argumentative Indian, then you're reading the entire book and then you're trying to summarize it, understand it, take something out of it. But does the same thing work in UPSC as well? Because what you might be reading in Lakshmikant in chapter 1 might not be enough for the examination. It might be enough for prelims, might not be enough for mains. So what do you do in order to overcome that problem? How do you retrain yourself to tackle that problem?
Very valid question. So actually, when we start reading a book for UPSC, sometimes it's very technical. For example, if you're reading through G.C. Leong for geography or Lakshmikant for public administration, in the first few chapters you will find information for which you won't find a relevant explanation also. If you get stuck at that level and you believe that I would have to just mug it up, it will make it difficult for you to follow through the book. I'll just quote an illustration. For example, if you, in the initial few chapters or few pages, you find that eastern coast of India is ravaged by tropical cyclones very frequently. If you don't have patience to read through the book, you will just end up mugging it rather than understanding it. But if you have patience, if you read through the book or subsequent chapters, you will find that the tropical cyclones have a particular mechanism, and there is a reason why they are more prevalent along the eastern coast of India. So there's always a connection between chapters. Sometimes it's inherent, sometimes it's hidden. So just have a patience to read through different material, connect the dots, because in the first chapter there will be some information for which you will find an explanation maybe in a subsequent chapter or maybe in a different book altogether. So that is very important. And don't prepare in silos. For example, for any topic in history, you will find an explanation for another phenomenon in the current affairs. For example, if there is a tribal or there is a social unrest, its explanation can also be found in history, colonial history of that country, can also be found in geography. Maybe there's some resources for which there is a fight. So always try to link different chapters, different aspects, and even different subjects. So be with an open mind. It will be very beneficial.
Let me now come to the question of when to study and what to study. So a question that normally arises amongst the students, minds of students is, should I be studying the newspaper early morning because that's what everyone does and that's what they see even on TV, oldies doing that. So do you think that's the right strategy, or even other than the newspaper, what should be the mechanism of figuring out what to study when?
So actually newspaper is one of the most crucial and perennial aspect of civil services preparation. One cannot, there is absolutely no substitute for newspaper in your preparation. Maybe prelims or mains, one should never leave reading a newspaper. But many students have several problems in newspaper, such as the one you quoted, that whether to read it in the morning or in the evening or at some other time. I am particularly of opinion that one should have a schedule of his own, and based on his convenience, personal convenience, he should select a time when he is comfortable reading a newspaper. But more important than that is a newspaper should be read carefully, because not everything in a newspaper is important, and not every important thing is to be read every time it appears in the newspaper. For example, there may be news about some cleanliness issues in a locality which is covered prominently in a newspaper. That may be an issue which you can quote, but definitely not a national or definitely not a very prominent issue. And also all the important events are covered repeatedly in a newspaper, editorials and also. So you should be very mindful of your time, so that once you feel that you have covered sufficiently about a particular topic, repeated editorials, repeated news items may be skipped, but it's always up to your own judgment.
That's very wonderfully said, because I also believe that newspaper, there is a lot more input than the output that you end up getting from it. So I personally have this belief that newspaper should be read or can be read at the least productive time of your day, because you have to be wary at that time that you're not very productive, you're tired probably. So you have to be more selective in nature and try and figure out what's the most important news for this day.
One strategy I would, sorry to interrupt, I would add that in newspaper, many students, especially in the beginning, end up spending maybe 2 hours or 4 hours, and then there's paucity of time always. I usually recommend to such students is that when you have a newspaper in your hand, just go through it without reading it. Just go to the headlines, mark which news you would want to study, so that while you turn the pages, you don't get distracted to some other news, which may be some masala item or maybe not so relevant a news for yourself. So mark those, read whatever you have marked, and always either make a note of it or just save the cuttings, whatever works for you.
You know, I was just about to say the same thing, that even today I follow the same approach you mark whatever you want to read, and then you're more focused that, okay, this is what I have to read and I don't have to look at anything else. And I remember when I was a student, I replaced the word chai sutta with chai newspaper. So in the evening, 6 to 8 or 5 to 7 used to be my time when I'm not very productive. I want to use it somehow. So instead of wasting it on chai, let's combine it with the newspaper.
So I usually say what the motto is: whatever works for you is good enough. And second thing is, many people ask how many newspapers should I read, or which newspaper should I read? Should I read the Indian Express or the Hindu or some other newspaper? I usually respond that one is enough. Two is always good, but whatever time suits you, one is enough. And which newspaper to read is always up to you. If you are comfortable with the language of Hindu, that is good enough. If you are comfortable with some other newspaper, that is also good enough. Because as I have already stated, every material covers 80 to 90% of whatever there is. So for that extra 10%, if you read through another newspaper or maybe two other newspapers, the proportionate time or the benefit is not commensurate. So you should be, one is enough, and then you can supplement it with other material somewhere else.
So I have another question in mind, and this is regarding how do you approach a book. So for example, if you get NCERT for economy and you've decided that this is the book that I want to be covering first, then do you start with the first chapters itself, or do you first create a summary of the book, understand what the book wants to tell you in entirety, and then you go forward with reading the chapters in a certain sequence that you like? What approach would you prefer, going forward according to the sequence that the book has given, or creating your own?
So actually, for scientific preparation, it is very important to understand this aspect also. All the authors are very mindful of the fact that the sequence of chapters in a book convey a specific meaning. They also convey the message of the book. So one should always first, while selecting the book also, one should always go through what all the content is and in what sequence it has been arranged, because that conveys the progression of various thoughts in the book. Once into that, I think depending on the subject, one can always choose which chapter to begin with, whichever he is comfortable, whichever he finds will add most value to him. And there is no need to read any book cover by cover, but you should be very sure that almost all the topics which are relevant to your subject you have read from one book or the another. And it is always, however, it is always important to also know that the book selection gives you the best results. So if you are careful in selecting a right book, that will be very useful to you.
I would like to add something to this. So this is something that I realized some time back, that we can follow this approach, and you can call it the cliff approach or the umbrella approach. So what I do in this approach is, you assume that you're standing at the top of a cliff, and the entire book is, let's say, it's a forest and it's laid down in front of you. So when you're standing on the mountain at the top, you have a better view. Let's say you were in the forest, you would not know how big or small that forest is, what all is there in that forest, what kind of animals are there in that forest. So in order to understand a book better, why not stand on the cliff first? Why not get to the top, understand what the book is about, and then go forward and dive deeper into the book?
Very well, because an overview helps you dive better.
Right. Before we wind up, is there anything specific that you would want to share with the students and tell the students that they can keep in mind to make the study more scientific?
Yeah, actually, my message would be that civil services examination actually is a very competitive exam. It's not one of the toughest exam. It only requires basic understanding which any reasonable common man should be able to apply. It's just that it is very competitive. There are a lot of capable candidates attempting for it. So don't ever be disheartened that you're not from a particular background, you're not from a particular language or whatever. You can always make a successful impression in the exam. So, but however, at the same time, a brute force approach will never work. You should not believe that if I continue reading whatever comes your way, you will be able to achieve success. So a scientific approach is very essential. Just before starting your preparation, you should always chart for yourself how you will approach your subject, your optional, your newspaper reading, your maybe 2 years of journey. You should be very thorough about it. Discuss your colleagues, discuss your teachers, discuss your whomever you find trustworthy, and then start. That will give you a very good head start, and definitely everyone is equipped to have a success in this examination.
You said that brute force will not work, and I just recalled something that my teacher said almost, I think, 10 years back. Common sense is not so common. That's very unfortunate in our country. And I think if students are able to turn it around and use common sense more in an examination like this, because it's not so common. So I think the probability of selection automatically can go up by leaps and bounds. So with this, we come to the end of this wonderful discussion. I'm very certain that you had a wonderful time listening to Amit here, and I'm very, very sure that we'll keep coming out with such sessions, and we'll have more such insights into UPSC preparation. I'm very sure that you're going to put down your feelings, your thoughts in the comment section below, so that I am able to understand as a teacher, what do you feel about this initiative? What do you feel about this discussion and this sort of ideology? And if you have any feedback, or if you have any comment to share with me, it'll be very, very helpful. I'll see you again very soon. Thanks a lot, Amit, for coming here.
Thank you, Anuj, and my best wishes to all of you. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.